The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Cam Ward shines at his pro day.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast.
Cam Ward's pro day on Monday at the University of Miami. He was absolutely fantastic. And I have to say the disclaimer before we even get into anything here. A pro day, a good pro day, does not mean that you're going to be a good quarterback. I don't think that Cam Ward is going to be a good quarterback because he had a good pro day. I think he's going to be a good quarterback because of his tape. But having a good pro day and checking some boxes and doing some things that he'll have to do for the Titans that he didn't necessarily do a ton of in college, that was a good part of this process as well. So Cam Ward work on some things that he'll have to do when he is the Tennessee Titans quarterback. So a good pro day experience overall, but I got to talk about the Titans part of this. The Titans sent the house. Literally, if you played NCAA at any point in time in your life, 50 points, send the house. That's what the Titans did for this pro day experience with Cam Ward. The Titans contingent had dinner with Cam Ward on Sunday night. And then Monday, at the pro day, you had Chad Brinker, Mike Borgonzi, Assistant General Manager Dave Ziegler. You had Reggie McKenzie. You had Brian Callahan. You had Nick Holtz. You had quarterback coach Bo Hardigree. I mean, literally everybody for the Tennessee Titans went to this pro day for Cam Ward. Not only did the Tennessee Titans send executives, scouts, and coaches to see Cam Ward, the Titans' full media and social media team was present as well, filming. Folks, I come to you to say this before we talk about the ins and outs of the pro day. If you are someone who is going kicking and screaming into the Cam Ward era, I'm begging you now, with a month left, just let it go. Call the fight. It's over. Cam Ward is going to be your quarterback of the future. The Titans' entire media conglomerate was there. Why? Because they're filming the pro day experience. And when they draft Cam Ward number 1 overall, they're going to have an awesome YouTube series about him becoming the pick. That's why the Titans' entire media, not just the coaches, scouts, and executives went. I mean, Amy Adams Strunk basically put a sign up saying, we're taking Cam Ward. And if you still think that this is Mike Borgonzi playing some sort of game to get a trade, like, honestly, I think you're just holding on to a dying wish at this point. But with that being said, again, Cam Ward, excellent in his pro day. The Tennessee Titans were there to see it. Ward put a ton of work into his pro day. He was out there prepping 4 hours early. He's been working on the script that he wanted to show to NFL scouts since January. He didn't throw at the combine. He said, his quarterback coach said, he didn't throw at the combine because he wanted to put a spotlight on his teammates by throwing only at his pro day. So a guy who's going to endear himself to the locker room and cares about his teammates as much as himself. Some ins and outs that really stood out to me about Cam Ward's pro day. Number 1, after one of Cam Ward's best throws, a rollout to his left, he threw the ball, and then he looked at Tennessee Titans general manager Mike Borgonzi and Tennessee Titans, what do we call it, czar of football, a president of football operations, if we want to be technical, Chad Brinker. And he had something to say to him. He said something to them. And they laughed, and they chuckled, and then Cam walked back and kept it going. But whatever that was, I hope one day we find out. I hope one day we find out. But Cam Ward, in some way or another, is letting them know, you don't want to pass on me, fellas. You don't want to pass on me, and I don't think they will. But outside of that, we wanted to see Cam Ward do some things, again, that he's going to have to do at the NFL level that he didn't do a lot of in the college level. Cam Ward was not under center very often in college. And look, that's not a Cam Ward complaint. That's college football. A lot of the things that you'll hear about college quarterbacks, about whether they can get into a third or fourth progression, about whether they can read defenses a certain way, about whether they can work under center, can they do play action and turn their back to the defense and then turn back around and get it done. Things that you have to do at the NFL level that you weren't really asked to do at the college level. Can Cam Ward do those? Well, he was able to work under center. We saw bootleg. We saw the deep and outside throws that he does need to work on. If you're going to be honest about Cam Ward and the evaluation of Cam Ward coming out of college, you have to say that deep throws outside the hashes are an area of weakness that he could improve upon. He threw some good passes in that realm. Incredible on posts and corners. Some of the corner routes that he threw, and then, of course, the double move where he's rolling to his left and Restrepo runs the double move down the left-hand sideline, and Cam Ward throws a 60-yard dot across his body. Again, a pro day throwing against air does not qualify you as the first overall pick. The tape qualifies you as the first overall pick. But having a good pro day just checks that box. And everything we saw from Cam Ward, lefty rollout, out and up, corner route, deep and outside, bootleg, under center, RPOs. He was throwing the ball with such velocity. Again, arm strength isn't just how far you can throw the football. Arm strength is the velocity at which you throw the football, because getting the ball inside the tighter windows at the NFL level will require a certain level of velocity that is necessary. Remember, Brian Callahan said there is a threshold on arm strength that you need at the NFL level, and that's just not distance, that's velocity. So keep that in mind. I am curious, like I said, about the stance. Cam Ward is a prominent right foot guy, and when you're under center, it's hard to have one foot far out in front of the other like you would during shotgun. So will the Titans adjust that stance at all? Will they move that right foot back to center a little bit when he's under center? I'll be interested. That's just a nerdy thing that, us diehards are going to be paying attention to going forward, is Cam Ward's stance and his feet and all that. Very interested. But again, the pro day doesn't make you the first overall pick, but I think it can check a good box. And I think it checked a good box for Cam Ward. He operated perfectly. He added in some things that you wanted to see growth-wise, and the Titans clearly sent the house to see Cam Ward, proving again that I think called the fight. Cam Ward is the number one pick.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The tournament games happening almost every day. Women's tournaments, men's tournaments. It's all happening. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. You can check out some NBA lines, the interconference matchup in Detroit tonight. How about that? Pistons host the Spurs. Cade Cunningham and crew have been looking pretty good this season. They're favored against the Spurs. FanDuel has the Pistons laying 8.5. It's not the real Spurs, but you got to play who you play. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
The New Orleans Saints may have a new starting offensive line after the signing of offensive lineman Dylan Radins.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast.
The New Orleans Saints may finally have their new look offensive line for 2025 after getting on a one-year deal former Tennessee Titans offensive lineman Dylan Radins on contract. They have signed Dylan Radins, and I think this is a good move by the New Orleans Saints. Listen, Radins on a one-year deal. This is not a deal that ends up breaking the bank for the New Orleans Saints. There's low stakes in terms of what the relationship is, and it's an unfamiliar face that is signed in to help the New Orleans Saints at one of the biggest absent spots that they have left on their roster, which is at left guard. Yes, Dylan Radins did play all of his snaps last year, 15 starts at right guard with the Tennessee Titans, but does have in his experience he's got experience at both guard spots, experience at both tackle spots. He spent more than 300 snaps at left guard. He can end up plugging in at left guard for the New Orleans Saints here in 2025 and being a potential starter for the team. And I think this signing is done with the expectation that he will be the team's starter. That would leave Trevor Penning and Taliesin Fuanga over on the left and right sides. Then you would end up having as your guards Dylan Radins as well as Cesar Ruiz, and then your starting center, of course, with Eric McCoy. That is a solid enough offensive line and one that is technically better than last year's. Don't forget, last year, Lucas Patrick was not supposed to be the starter at left guard. He was supposed to be the backup center and backup interior offensive lineman, while another guy, Nick Saldiveri, who was drafted at the top of day 3 a few years ago, was expected to be the guy to jump in there and start at left guard. But then a training camp injury forced Saldiveri out of the conversation and forced Lucas Patrick into the conversation. And there were a lot of people who were even picking Oli Udoh ahead of Lucas Patrick. And of course, Oli Udoh struggled quite a bit in this offense last year. And so when you saw Lucas Patrick depart, it never felt like he was really going to be on his way back and that he was eventually going to end up somewhere else. He toured around, visited with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Seattle Seahawks, and eventually lands with the Cleveland Browns. Now the New Orleans Saints end up being the benefactor because instead of them being able to run it back in terms of their starting offensive line, they bring somebody in that could absolutely take that starting left role. Now, I do think there is still some prove it in Radins' game, right? He's got to be able to come in here in New Orleans, show that he can learn this offense, show that he can work with Kellen Moore, and win, I think, still that starting left guard spot. The 1-year deal effectively makes it, depending upon what the numbers look like in terms of money, but the 1-year deal effectively makes it so that it's not necessarily a guaranteed thing that he's stepping into the starting role, but I think you're signing Dylan Radins in the hopes of having a 27-year-old guy come in on a 1-year deal, become your starter, and then potentially sign a second contract after that if he plays well. If not, then I think you can continue to stockpile at this position, as the Saints already have, adding guys like Will Clapp, bringing a guy like Landon Young back, and probably still dipping into the draft. We'll discuss that here in a moment, though. So what does Dylan Radins bring? Well, 23 total pressures allowed last year in the 15 games that he started at right guard. 6 of those pressures were sacks, so you'd like to see that number come down. He also allowed 5 sacks, playing multiple positions back in 2023. So you'd like to see some improvement there. Was called for 5 penalties last year, is what it is, but certainly would like to see that number come down. But in terms of quality and in terms of traits, this guy's got it all. 6'6", 317 pounds or 300 plus pounds, athletic at that size, violent player as well, and is somebody that brings excellent run blocking potential. He'll need to make some strides when it comes to what he can do as a pass blocker as well. But that's where I think that the Saints might be able to help them out. We go all the way back to Dylan Radins' draft class and his draft testing when he came in with a 9.28 RAS. New Orleans Saints loved them. Some solid RAS. He had 34-inch arms, so very well equipped in terms of length to play this position. Had a 5.16 40-yard dash. Not sub 5, not the type of thing that's going to get you super excited, but athletic enough for sure for the position. 32-inch vertical leap as well as a 9'4" broad jump. Both of those are outstanding for his position and his size. So he comes in with very good explosive factors. And here's my favorite thing, a 4.57 short shuttle, as well as a 7.26 3-cone. Do you really need to know those numbers? No. But what you should know is that those numbers are really good. And what that means in both of those workouts is that he moves well, changes directions well, and works very well in short distance situations or short area situations. Meaning that when you need him to be somebody that goes from the left side to the right side, pulling as a blocker and becoming the lead guy, he can do that. He can move quickly, and he's able to get that done. Now, he did have an ACL injury back in 2022, but it doesn't look to have slowed him up very much. He has done well coming back from that injury. The 2 games that he missed last year were shoulder injuries. Now, here's the last piece for me, which is kind of the secret sauce of all of this situation. And it's maybe a guy that's not going to get pointed to very much when it comes to this signing. But I think the real difference maker in this signing, because you are still trying to get the best out of Dylan Radins. I don't think the Tennessee Titans did a good job of doing that. And so now you're trying to get the best. And everyone's going to point to Brendan Nugent, and rightfully so, as the offensive line coach. However, for me, the key to this guy's development is going to be Jari Evans, who of course was promoted and he's advanced now as an offensive line coach and has a future Hall of Fame career at the position, playing guard. He has helped Cesar Ruiz tremendously. He feels so much better and he's gotten so much confident. And the reason why is because of Jari Evans. And so my big thing here in terms of the secret sauce or the missing ingredient or the thing that's going to get the best out of Dillon Radunz for me all comes down to Jari Evans coaching him up on the interior. And if Jari Evans can do that, which I do believe that he can because we've seen him do it already, I do think that he can have a major impact on Dillon Radunz, who, with the Tennessee Titans played well, but hasn't really lived up to the stellar tape that he put out as an NDSU player back in college. Second round draft pick. This is a great investment by the New Orleans Saints, especially on a not going to break the bank 1 year deal for a very, very athletic, very, very violent, well-maintained, as well as like the mentals are well-maintained type of player. And you're putting him with a great developer, it turns out, in Jari Evans, who could continue to build his ledger by getting the best out of Dillon Radunz here in New Orleans as a starting left guard.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The tournament games happening almost every day. Women's tournaments, men's tournaments. It's all happening. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. You can check out some NBA lines, the interconference matchup in Detroit tonight. How about that? Pistons host the Spurs. Cade Cunningham and crew have been looking pretty good this season. They're favored against the Spurs. FanDuel has the Pistons laying 8.5. It's not the real Spurs, but you got to play who you play. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast.
Wanting change so bad, do we have a blind spot? So I thought about this because something hit me the other day. What hit me the other day was, even though the Jaguars have added 9 or 10 free agents, someone asked James Gladstone a question about maybe signing more other positions. And he hinted at the fact that, well, we need to leave room for the players that we picked that we're going to onboard. And it made total sense to me because you cannot just sit here and fill all of these spots with all of these contracted players and then draft a whole bunch of other people that, because they got drafted, they're due money, and then think that you're going to have the necessary room, because the Jaguar fans probably thought they needed 15 to 16 signings in free agency. I do not. I just think that that's always a bad way of doing business, because you're going to be changing those guys out each and every season, because the last 5 or 6 guys, if you did it that way, would only get 1-year deals. And so you can't ever develop consistency the way that you need to. However, it's more to it than that. And I really thought deeply about it. We sit here and talk about the draft, which is the next phase of personnel additions that are going to come. The one thing we always say is best player available, regardless of position, of course, with limitations. Like, you're not going to draft a quarterback day 1 or day 2. You're just not, because you're invested in Trevor Lawrence. $250 million invested in Trevor Lawrence. There's some people think that they're going to, they could add an edge rusher, even though they have 2, because most teams usually would like to have multiple sets, of guys that can do that. And that's understandable. But I don't know how high they'd use that on a pick like that, when you consider if you pick a guy at number 5 who plays the same position as one of your other best players, then you'll have to switch your base or hope or kind of put yourself at a disadvantage trying to get them all on the field in critical moments. In critical moments is the first play of the game, just as well as when in the fourth quarter. So all of those things matter when we talk about the allocation of funds and resources and how you use them. So it made me really, really think, does he already know the positions where he's going to add players to? Go through the roster and see where the depth chart is incomplete, and that will tell you where he believes he's going to have to add some people. So if that's the case, are we having a blind spot for James Gladstone and Tony Boselli and Liam Cohen because we were so happy that Shad Khan finally made these wholesale changes to the staff and decided to take this entire organization in a different route It doesn't mean that he's made the right choices. It means he did the right thing, like he had the right plan and he had the right blueprint on his trestle board, but he didn't necessarily pick the right people to do certain things. Now, for the record, I am not being skeptical of anyone that they hire. That's not my point. My point is should I be? Or should I at least take off the rose-colored shades a little bit and start looking at what they've done? The first thing that came up was the point that I just made about the draft. If the perception is that, well, we left room to onboard our draft picks so those guys can come in and be the best version of themselves, how do you know what positions they're going to play if you're picking best player available? Okay, the 5th pick, I get it. Maybe the 36th pick, I can kind of get it. You can kind of have an idea what's going to be available. This ain't about just those picks. There are 9 other picks in this draft, 2 in the 3rd, 2 in the 4th. How do you know you're going to be able to get players where you're not already pretty set on the depth chart? If that's the case. And then that puts you back into that same situation that you were in that you just explained your way out of when you said, well, no, we had to leave room for people. Or does it mean that even though numbers-wise right now on the depth chart, regardless of who is in those positions, you'll still add somebody, and there's always someone you can move on from the bottom, and the guys at the top are going to compete. Why am I saying that? Well, because when I mention players in segment number 2, it's going to surprise you who I am starting to feel like is a possibility for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've already mentioned this player several times, but the more I look at it, there's a position where it seems like they might be set. And I think there might be a player sitting there looking them dead in the face, right in the face, right smack in the face. And they're going to have a big, big choice to make. Wanting to change things so bad that when those changes actually came up, it's like, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You're going in a certain direction, but you realize you need a new car. You stop at the dealership and they want to sell you a used car where you got to keep some of the parts of your old car. And you go, no. In fact, I'm going across the street. I'm going to buy a whole new brand. I'm going to buy a whole new vehicle, fresh car. And then you get back in your car and you start driving. Are you going in the right way? Are you going in the right direction? Yeah, you needed a new car, but are you still headed in the right direction? So I do believe they are. When you look at it in a vacuum, I haven't been opposed to anything that they've done so far. And mainly I've refrained from being overly critical. And I know I did this to much to the chagrin of some people that, listen to me on a daily basis. And they pretty much told me so. And I told them to pause for the cause and just step back a little bit because I do this thing at my own pace, right? I'm going to do this every day, man. I ain't going to sit here and speedball the material just because one person thinks that I'm not being critical enough. So I did ask myself some of these questions. Do I really like everything that they've done? So I had to go and look at the depth chart real quick, right? And I didn't look at ESPN or our lads. I looked at the Jacksonville Jaguars depth chart. And I know it doesn't mean a whole bunch, but if they put it up there, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to use it, right? And the thing is, if you go to Jaguars.com and look at Jaguars.com/team/depth chart, they did this. So when you look at what they did in the context of trying to figure out whether or not they have left room to onboard the draft picks at the positions that you and I think they need to add people, it is very telling because the new additions to the team are not there. No free agents are listed. So on the offense, and it's an offense that obviously sometimes people list 12 starters because they also list the second tight end. The Jaguars didn't do that. It's a quarterback, a running back, 2 receivers, and a tight end, and of course the offensive lineman. Here are your starters. Parker Washington at 1 receiver spot, Brian Thomas Jr. at the other one, Etienne is your running back, Anton Harrison is your right tackle, Walker Little is your left tackle, and Ezra Cleveland is your left guard. Everybody else is blank. Everybody else is blank. And then they got the guys on the second team. The only second team guys that are on the offensive line, well, there's 3. Cole Van Lannon, Luke Fortner, and Javon Foster. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but they added 4 people. So that's 11 offensive linemen. Does that sound like they left room for somebody? Right? I don't think so. Wide receiver. There are 2 mentioned. And guess who isn't on it? Gabe Davis. He's not there, right? He's not even listed at second team. And they listed 3 running backs. Here's what they did. They listed Keelan Robinson as the 4th team back with no 3rd team back, right? So when you look at it like that, it kind of tells you where you think they might plug people in. At linebacker, they named 4 people, but they named co-starters. Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma are co-starters, and Ventrell Miller and Yasser Abdullah are co-starters. I think, that's the outside line. That's in a 3 linebacker set, and Foye Oluwakan is the single starter. So it looks like to me that there's competition there. Tyson Campbell is listed at 1 corner. Jarian Jones is listed at 2nd team outside at corner, and Montek Brown is 2nd team. Darnell Savage is listed as a starting safety, being backed up by Andrew Wingard, and Antonio Johnson is listed as a 2nd team safety. On the defensive line, the nose tackle position, Devon Hamilton, Tyler Lacey, and Jordan Jefferson, all the way across the board, right? Tells me that they're probably not going to get a person to play the 0 or the 1. The defensive tackle position, Eric Armstead is listed 1st. 2nd team is blank, and Mason Smith is listed 3rd. Gives you something to think about. Defensive ends, they have 3. Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker. Miles Cole is listed at Trayvon Walker's backup. Therefore, there's an edge 3 that is right there and available for, the taking, right? So looking at that, if this gives any indication of where they want to inject people, defensive tackle, if they take Mason Graham, who all weekend, all the mock drafts I saw, they had Mason Graham sitting right there for the Jaguars at number 5. That would mean that Jacksonville Jaguars would take him and make it a competitive situation between him and Eric Armstead at 3 technique. To me, that's what we get, right? It also appears that the Jaguars having 4 corners right now listed, and then when you add 1 more with the signing of Joy Lewis, that they're probably good with that, but then they may go and draft 1 more guy to make it 6. So now I'm starting to look around and I say, okay, if it's Travis Hunter, where does he play? Are they going to go and get another wide receiver? Because right now they only have 2 listed on the depth chart. And Gabe Davis, I don't know if it's because he was hurt or whatever, because there are some other guys on here that are banged up that aren't listed on here. So I don't know if a guy, maybe the list doesn't include guys that ended up being banged up. But I try to sit here and I go over this, and I think the one kid that outside of Travis Hunter, outside of Abdul Carter, outside of Ted McMillan, who I don't think is a top 5 pick now, there's just too many questions. I'm looking at Armand Membu, man, as a dude that maybe, just maybe, they just go, we got to let him come in and compete at right tackle. And maybe he competes with the kid that they signed from Dallas, and you play him at right tackle. Maybe you start him out at right guard and play Pat McCarry at left guard, and Ezra Cleveland is but they got Ezra Cleveland here listed as a starter, so maybe they like Ezra Cleveland. So the right guard spot is obviously there for Pat McCarry. The center spot is James Hainsey. Maybe McCarry is his backup, or they got Luke Fortner here listed 2nd team. I'm wondering if Armand Membu is good enough for them to look at a situation where if they're sitting there looking at, and I don't think Abdul Carter is going to get past New England. I actually don't think he's going to get past Cleveland. I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, and I talked to someone who covered the Titans for a long time. They said that Travis Hunter doesn't sound like a pick for Mike Vrabel. They just don't seem to think they seem to think that maybe the pick for Vrabel is an offensive lineman like Membu to help protect their quarterback, Drake May. But they signed another corner in the draft. If they were going to take Travis Hunter, they wouldn't take him at receiver. They take him at corner at that high. and they would play him there.